Does sharing GPS locations with your relationship partner signal a deeper problem of trust in the relationship? So, this is an interesting idea that was kind of brought forth because in my video that I did the other day, I mentioned that my girlfriend shares her GPS location with me. We actually share with each other, okay? And that was brought up as like, well, isn't that signaling or a kind of a red flag maybe? Is that a deeper trust issue that you have between you and her? So I'll share with you the YouTube comments that kind of happened from it because this is where this came from. Okay, I don't know if you can see, but I'll read it here. So Snapshot, as we'll say his name, Snapshot here. Having the GPS location of your partner at all times on your phone, question mark, that is bordering on extreme ownership of another person. If you aren't sure where she is, question mark, call her. If she doesn't pick up after a few calls and doesn't return texts, question mark, then start worrying. So my reply is this is a cope and you need to check yourself and the social conditioning that you have been subjected to if you believe that sharing it is location sharing is extreme ownership of another person. Having location share with modern phones is rather easy to do nowadays. And it's not an interruption to anyone's life and certainly doesn't involve staring at someone's location all day long. So the real question you need to ask yourself is why are you not doing this with an LTR? So his reply was if you can explain to me the necessity of such action, I could perhaps understand this behavior. Naturally, there isn't one unless you live in a god awful place where women get harassed left, right, and center, which I don't believe you do. And it's not about interruption on someone's life. It's about taking being protective too far, in my view. Personally, where I live, Portugal, I have no necessity to do this. But if it works and is a necessity to you, so be it. I just hope that people that listened to that part realized that is not normal behavior. So my response was, hey, brother, I'll do a video, which we're doing right now, on this and get into my view in depth. And then you can decide, of course, whether it's something you care to do or not. I understand your viewpoint, although, and where you're coming from. And then his reply was, thank you, Paul. I would also appreciate your insight on this to perhaps better understand the context here in play. Other than that, really good video here. Only this part seems a bit odd to me. Keep up the great work. Okay, good. So, I mean, it was a good, he is a disagreement. I'm okay with disagreements. I welcome them. So let's talk now about some ideologies here. Look, the issue of trust, okay, and the issues of probability are used as cop outs for not doing the sensible thing. And this gentleman is in Portugal, okay? Now I'm not all USA all the time if you know if you know me, all right? I've traveled the world and I respect other cultures and positions on things and I don't always think that the American way of looking at things is the best way. But this is one of those scenarios though where a lot of my European friends are going to have to stretch their imagination to understand what I'm saying because the way that you've been brought up and culturally conditioned in Europe is to think that, well, because of probability's sake and because of covertly, I'm going to trust in a system, I don't have to do certain things to keep myself safe, to keep myself free, and to make decisions for myself. This is what happens when you have a lot of government intrusion into your life. In the United States, we have a very individualistic viewpoint that goes back pretty far. And so you have a lot of people that fight against this idea of government or system taking care of things for you. in a blind sort of way. Okay. And this is what we're dealing with, is that ideology. I know I'm extending this to the larger political thing, but it does apply here. You don't have gun rights, as far as I know, in Portugal. I haven't checked, but it's not like here in Michigan where I can carry a firearm anywhere I want to, pretty much. Okay, with some restrictions, with government buildings and stuff. But for the most part, I have freedom to to protect myself and for self-defense through carrying a firearm. I'm also better trained with a firearm than 99% of most police officers and law enforcement. So for me to not care for example, I live in a good neighborhood. I have arranged my life, which is more important for self-defense, by the way, is that you arrange your life in such a way where you don't need it, right? So my life is arranged where I don't really need self-defense per se, and I don't necessarily need to carry a firearm. Yet I do pretty often. And I have self-defense skills. Why? Because that puts me in charge and in control of my own life. It's not a hindrance for me to carry a firearm. I'm very used to doing it all the time. I have a level of responsibility, I feel like, as well, with my level of training and my background in the military, that if something were to occur that requires a firearm and I can be a first responder, I have kind of responsibility given my skill set and experience to maybe do that. That is the way that I think. That is not the way you think in Portugal. Okay. That's not the way most my European friends think, and that's okay. But you got to understand that's my perspective, my point of view is that I have a level of responsibility to take care of myself, not rely on the police, the government, or somebody else, or a peaceful society, or especially a potential criminal or threat to take care of me. You know what I mean? I'm not going to trust all of those sources more than I can trust myself. So I do a certain amount of due diligence for certain things. And it's not just carrying a firearm, having access to first aid, for example, in my vehicle. It's not a big deal. It's not an intrusion on my life, but I have access to, first aid stuff if something happens, usually in my vehicle or in my house, right? Because maybe I'm the first responder when someone gets a cut or an accident happens and it requires first aid. I'd rather have that stuff with me. It's just a simple precaution. Do you put a fire extinguisher in your home or have smoke detectors? Maybe you do that in Portugal because in your area, the government tells you you have to. We have areas like that in the United States as well, particularly if you're a renter or something like that, that there's a requirement. You have to have so many smoke detectors. You have to have so certain safety things have to be in place according to the government, right? But see, here in the United States, though, whether that's a case or not, we generally believe, and I believe it's my responsibility, not the government's responsibility, to tell me that I need a smoke detector or to tell me that I need a fire extinguisher. That is a risk assessment I need to make, and I do that on my own. And so it's these little things of taking care of things. So I have a couple of vehicles, for example. I have the ability to change a tire or to do some minimal roadside maintenance to get my car back on the road if my car has a small breakdown. I can use jumper cables to start my vehicle. I got a tire kit to get my car back on the road so I can get to safety. Again, you may or may not have that, but that's this mentality. It's a mindset. And I challenge you, whether you're in Portugal, whether you're in Europe, Asia, United States, doesn't matter. If you're a man, that you embrace this mindset of taking charge of your life and taking measures in your life to keep yourself safe and to protect yourself, even if the probability is low of something happening. It's pretty low probability that my house is going to catch on fire. but I better still take that precaution, right? I feel like it would be irresponsible for me not to. And then it brings up the question of why not? Why wouldn't I just do the simple step that doesn't really interrupt my life or impact my life that much, just to make sure I have a smoke detector and a fire extinguisher? Why wouldn't I do that? You know what I mean? Why wouldn't I at least have a firearm in my home to protect my family in case of a home invasion? Even though if I'm in a low crime area, it still happens, right? And I could go down the list, you know, but part of being a man and having that masculine presence is being survivable. I've talked about this in my coaching groups, is that you need to be able to fight, fuck, and survive. Okay. That you can't consider yourself the alpha male version of yourself if those three things aren't covered. And part of being survivable is preparation, and preparing for certain things. So before getting into GPSs with the relationship and all that kind of stuff, we need to have that discussion first, because there's a mindset that leverages the issue of trust or leverages the issue of probability that moves you into thinking you shouldn't do certain things to take control of your life. That's the lie. Okay. Now you're either going to see that lie for what it is or you're not. It's up to you. You can see the lie for what it is and you make choices. For example, not everybody is going to choose to carry a firearm, even if they could. And that's as long as you're making a conscious choice and you're doing your own risk assessment, you know what? Then it's up to you. It's your choice. But social conditioning, and part of that is through government systems, political systems, consumerism, those sorts of things, pushes you into behaviors and pushes you into a mindset of helplessness. It's, oh, I'm not doing anything proactive, for example, to protect my home. So then if my home is on fire or there's somebody stealing from it or whatever, now I'm at the mercy of a system to do it for me, which does what? It makes me a slave to that system. So you have to see in a bigger sense what the social conditioning is doing. Okay. And when you have a system of social conditioning that wants you to be dependent on that system, it will promote to you the lie that you don't need to take care of things or take precautions and do. You should trust. You should trust the system, the government, your neighbors, society, God, whatever, to do things for you that you should be taking care of on your own and taking responsibility for on your own. And so that is the lie. Okay. And this lie extends to something like GPS locations on the phone with your woman. Okay. So now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about, the social conditioning around women. The social conditioning around women is that anything that creates accountability for women is somehow wrong. And if it comes from a man, it's probably misogynistic. Okay. So that is the social conditioning. This allows men to be put in a position of a form of social slavery where they work really hard to pay for and fund the governments and the lifestyles of women so that they can do whatever they want. And the more unstable families are and the more unstable those lifestyles are, the more of a slave that man becomes when he's a victim to it. A guy who's been divorced a couple of times and has kids from different moms, for example, he spends more money. He has to work harder, and more of that money goes into the system, the consumerist system, right? Versus into his pocket and into his bank account and into his investments. So unstable relationships is what we're having We're being socially conditioned towards. And we're being told a bunch of lies that leads to dishonesty. You know, it leads to dishonesty and instability. And one of those lies is to say that having transparency in your relationship somehow means that you don't trust your girl or that she doesn't trust you and that there's a red flag or a problem. And that's not true. I actually challenge that and I tell you, it is the other way around. Okay. So let me bring off another example. Let's say we get in a business deal and we're going to both invest a certain amount of our money into a new company we're going to try out. Okay. And there's some risk involved. Okay. And stuff. And we have an agreement about how we should get paid on this investment as the company starts to make money. We have an agreement on ownership. Should we not sit down in front of an attorney and draw up an agreement so that it's legally binding and that everything is clear so that we can have an honest relationship with each other? Shouldn't we do that? Look, if I'm getting into business with you, you are the type of person I need to trust and I need to shake hands. I need to be able to have a handshake agreement with you. And I need to be able to trust that you're going to do the right thing, even when I'm not looking. That's the type of person I expect you to be if we get into a business relationship. But that being said, we're still going to sit down and draw up an agreement, even if it's somewhat informal, but we at least understand the parameters. Do you know what I mean? It's something we're in, and but if it's that kind of a business arrangement with where we both co-own something, it's going to be a legally binding agreement. Not because I don't trust you or because you don't trust me. The opposite is true. We both trust each other to be able to create this legal agreement. We both trust each other enough where we want to protect each other's interests as well as our own, where we're going to do this in a way that's actually binding. You see what I'm saying? When someone says, hey, this is interesting. We'll pivot for a second. I was watching something with my girlfriend about scams, right? And a big part of the scam would be, and this particular scam was getting authors who is self-published to pay somebody else to try to market their stuff, which led into, ideas about getting their stuff out for a movie deal and stuff like that. And the scam was the person who is the author kept having to pay this company in order to market their stuff and to make it into a movie and all this stuff. And it was all bullshit, right? It was all just siphoning money from these poor people's pockets, right? And the scam was always, we'll just pay your money and we have this relationship and we're going to make this happen. Where's the legally binding agreements? Where's the stuff in writing? You see what I'm saying? It's the scam artist that says, trust me, with no accountability. It's the person who's trying to dupe you, whether it's a woman, whether it's a business partner, whether it's someone who's supposed to be your friend, or whether it's some guy you're trying to hire to do something that wants you to send him money and trust him without any accountability whatsoever. That's the scam artist that wants that. The scam artist wants a lack of clarity for what this relationship's going to be like. The scam artist wants less transparency. So, regardless of how it shows up, and this is for your relationships as well as, your romantic relationships, as well as in life, the person who is trying to scam you, or at least wants to protect the opportunity to scam you, is the person who doesn't want transparency. Okay. That is how it goes always. Okay. So now that being said, let's look at GPS stuff. Let's look at cheating in general. Now, if you join my community, all right, you're going to there's so many things you get for free in my community. I forget to mention half of them. But one of the things you'll get in your email is a cheat proof your relationship guideline. And it's like several email, thing that'll happen over a couple weeks. And you read through it, it allows you to cheat proof to really maintain good boundaries and standards. Now, why maintain boundaries and standards with a woman? Why cheat proof your relationship, right? You should just trust her. Trust that woman. If you picked a good woman, she's pretty, she smells nice, she touches your wiener, she makes you feel happy within the first couple of months. Just trust her, right? Does that sound a little bit naive to you? Because it should. All right. Yes, trust that woman because she invites transparency in the relationship. If she doesn't invite transparency, it's because she's trying to hide something. And it's only social conditioning that would have you think otherwise. It's only a social narrative that says, how dare you require any transparency or accountability on a woman's behavior? That makes you a bad man. That kind of crazy thinking can only be sold to you through a massive effort in our social environment because it's not logical, it's not sensible. A person who's being honest invites transparency. They want you to see that they're being honest. They don't say, how dare you? How dare you ask for transparency here? You should just trust me. That's something that a deceptive person does. And they rely on that in order to deceive you. So you can how do you remove deceptiveness in your relationships? Transparency as a requirement for a boundary. And it's super easy and super simple to do. And if a woman is like, oh, I don't know about that, she's not worthy of your commitment. She's not worthy of your sexual commitment. She's asking you to commit to her sexually while she maintains the ability to do things in secret. And that any sort of checking up on that or questions, concerns, or any boundaries on your part makes you a bad guy because you don't trust her. And that must mean that you're insecure. Do you see the psyop? Do you see how crazy that line of thinking is? It's a psyop. And if you don't see it, man, I don't know what to do for you. You're going to learn the hard way, and then you'll come to my community with a story, and we'll have to unravel it. But I'd rather you just learn to begin with, right? I'd rather you just take the truth pill now, okay? And not fuck your life up and have to have a hard lesson. People who are trustworthy invite transparency. That is the number one thing. I worked for our government, and I worked both in the combat side as well as the intelligence side. Okay, the US government at war. All right. Let me tell you, we rely on the intelligence side on a lack of transparency in order to dupe, sway, convince our enemies of things, right? To gather intelligence, to get somebody to do something that maybe it's not in their best interest. We rely on a lack of transparency. Okay. Transparency removes the ability to do that. It's a very, very simple concept. And so if you don't invite transparency in your relationship, you're inviting deception. And people are naturally deceptive, particularly women people, okay? Because we evolved as men to use violence and coercion to get what we want. We're not any better, all right? We're not any better. It's not a moral judgment to say women are deceptive because men are violent and coercive, right? If we're talking about our mammalian brains, being the stronger of the sexes, our monkey brain says be violent, be coercive when you're pushed against the wall, all right? A woman's brain says be deceptive, be manipulative because they're the weaker of the two of the sexes. Okay, physically weaker usually. If they could use violence and coercion, they would, and they certainly do sometimes. But in absence of that, what have they evolved into? Manipulation and deception. So it's a natural thing to do when she feels some kind of way or pushed up against the wall or whatever. And you don't build trust in a relationship by giving her all the opportunity to do that, and you never ever having a boundary or a standard or requiring any accountability for that. All that does is breed more deception. You're not leading your relationship if you run your relationship without boundary, standards, and accountability. You're instead allowing for deception to occur. And then you're just hoping she won't cheat on you. Now, granted, you could share GPS locations, share all kinds of stuff, and she could still cheat, of course, right? But it's not about being paranoid about cheating, and it's not about insecurity. You got to remove that. That's already the social conditioning that you're immediately going to think, well, you mean if I have the standard that doesn't that mean I'm insecure? That is a social narrative. That's a way to shame men out of doing what's within their best interest. Let's think prenuptial agreement. Anybody who gets married, I don't care if you're fucking broke and don't have two nickels to rub together, should be getting a prenuptial agreement. Why? Because prenuptial agreements breed trust. That's why. You're sitting down and you're talking about the transactional aspect of marriage, not the covenant one, not the thing before God, but the contract with the state. You're entering in a contract with the state, whether you recognize it or not. Okay. And it's either letting the government and the state dictate the terms of that contract, or you're going to take control of it and decide between you and your woman what those terms are going to be. And then you decide while you love each other, okay, how to protect each other with that contract. And then revisit it just like you would your will or your trust every few years. Do you do a will in case you die? Do you do life insurance? Do you do a trust? Right? You do those things, right? To prevent problems and to take care of your person that you're in a relationship with. Why wouldn't you do a prenuptial agreement to do the same? Because the social conditioning says you need to be a slave. That's why. And any woman with a sense about her, okay, can understand that this agreement, this is you guys protecting each other. And again, that prenuptial and subsequent postnuptial agreements, that breeds trust, because now a woman and a guy isn't sitting back going, uh-oh, I don't know what's going to happen if we break up because we have all our money and our kids and our house are tied together. I don't know what the breakup looks like. So now I'm going to hold my cards close to my chest. I'm now afraid to bring up a problem. I'm now afraid to have this argument. I'm now afraid to work on things. I'm now, I better not tell her about this because then she might get upset and it creates this problem. And what if we break up? And then what does the breakup look like? You see what I'm saying? It without having an understanding of what the breakup would look like, that breeds deception because anxiety and fear goes up, and anxiety and fear about your outcomes is what causes part of what drives normal good people into deception. I'm not talking about people who are just like deceptive as a strategy all the time, but people who have morals and beliefs that you shouldn't be deceptive are deceptive all the time. What drives them to that is fear. What drives them to that is the ability to lack of transparency and fear about outcomes, right? You do a prenuptial agreement, you remove those fears, you take down that anxiety. Why wouldn't you do that? The only reason you wouldn't do it is social conditioning. You know, somebody's telling you you're insecure or you're crazy or you're not taking care of her for some reason if you do such a thing. You see what I'm saying? Well, it's the same with GPS sharing. Okay. When I go through my cheat proof material, all right, there's different layers. You want to think of it like a defense mechanism against cheating. The number one layer, I won't go through all of them in this video, okay? Because you can sign up for my community, you get it for free in your email. All right. I think I could cover it in another video, but it makes the video too long to cover all of it. But for men and for women, because of the way our brains work, there are different layers that would prevent, we'll say, crossing the lines in our relationship commitments, right? Emotional cheating, sexual cheating, cheating behaviors, all those sorts of things. Everybody, another red pilling moment for some of you may be listening to this. Every single human being on earth is capable and susceptible to cheating. It's just that certain people will have more defenses up against it to prevent it than others. Having morals and beliefs, for example, is one of those things, right? Um, but there's layers, okay? And a girl being a good girl and having morals and beliefs, that's the last line of defense for a girl, is her beliefs. All right. Girls all the time who believe they shouldn't cheat and they know it's wrong end up cheating all the time because it's the weakest of all the layers. For a girl, the strongest layer is her desire towards you. But that desire has to be both present as well as high, right? So her desire for you has to be high. And if it's the highest she's ever experienced, then you have more security, right? I recommend you don't get in a commitment and offer your sexual fidelity unless that desire is at that point. But her desire has to be high for you. But let's say you're not present. Let's say you're like me, I leave for military stuff. I'm gone for weeks, right? Okay. Well, the lack of connection with me can cause that desire to be less present in her brain, which means she's more susceptible now to opening herself up to crossing boundaries. And that's same with me too. That's anybody, right? Guys, for a guy, desire isn't the top thing because guys will sleep with other women, even if they desire their partner, their woman 100%, right? But for women, that desire is most important. But that desire is compromised through distance, through the ups and downs of a relationship. You know what I mean? So, what's the next line of defense for a woman? The next line of defense is transparency. It's getting caught. If she knows that you could see potentially the text she's sending out, if you could see the DMs she's sending and receiving and responding, if you could see how she's acting towards members of the opposite sex, if you could see her location, all of those things, just knowing that you could potentially see those things if you wanted to creates transparency. And that transparency prevents all kinds of behaviors. Now, here's the difference between a good woman, quote, quote, and a woman that maybe is not worth your commitment. A good woman, okay, a good woman who's minded towards having a good relationship invites transparency. She wants to share her location with you. She wants to give you her passwords. And think about the utility of it. I mean, her car breaks down and I have her location, I can find her. If something threatening does happen, even though it's a lower probability, I could find her. But there's certain things that she does because the question was, well, I don't think she needs that. Well, how do you know, guy from Portugal? you know, my girl has done all right, so she's been a vet tech and she's done different types of dog sitting situations where the animal needs medication because of her credentials as basically a veterinary nurse. She can get hired to watch over and check up on pets, for some money or whatever. That where she goes to a house and she has to let the animal out, check up on the animal, and administer medication for that animal. That's something that she does sometimes for just a little bit of extra cash, you know. So she's going to strange places sometimes. She wants me to have her GPS location. You see, so there are situations and circumstances where a woman, especially any big city, you're in Portugal, but so what? Women get assaulted in Portugal too. And so it's not even like this paranoia about getting assaulted or whatever. She just wants my presence. She wants to feel my protection. It's a psychological thing more than anything else. It's more than it is practical. She wants to feel my presence and my protection. And knowing that I know where she's at makes her feel that. And because she invites transparency into our lives, I know her passwords. I can read all of her shit. I don't though. Now here's the other part. If I'm feeling the need to spy on my girlfriend all the time, or if she feels the need to spy on me all the time, yes, then that's a problem, right? That would be a red flag. That would be a trust issue that would need to get addressed for sure, 100%. But we're not talking about feeling the need to spy on each other. We're just talking about a little bit of transparency, and it's practical and it's easy. Sharing locations is the press of a button, and it has no negative impact unless you're trying to hide something. Sharing a password has been helpful to me, by the way, because then I forget passwords for stuff and I can ask her. You know what I mean? So it's, if I got nothing to hide, why do I care about sharing passwords? You see what I'm saying? And if this is somebody, this is not somebody that I'm just dating either. Let me make that clarification. If you're not in a commitment, okay, if you're not building a life with this person, if it's not an LTR, I agree. Don't share that stuff, because that person doesn't have that right, really, hasn't earned the right for you to share that stuff with them, right? And you certainly shouldn't feel the need to be checking up on someone that you're dating. But if you're building a life with somebody and building a future with somebody, you plan on being with this person 10, 20, 50 years down the line. If things continue to go well and work out, why would you not share these things? If I get put in the hospital, I would like my girl to be able to get into my accounts and take care of things, right? And to contact other people who I work with that would take care of my affairs. If she got put in the hospital, she would want the same thing as well, right? Why would we not share? I'm not talking about just some girl you're dating, but somebody you're planning a life with. Why would you not share that stuff? It's impractical to not share it. The only reason you wouldn't share things like locations, passwords, stuff like that with someone you're planning a future with is because you've been socially conditioned not to, because the world says, how dare you allow for accountability, potential accountability for a woman's behavior? Or perhaps you're trying to hide your own behavior. Maybe you got your own deception that you're dealing with. Maybe you want to have a side chick, or you want to do some different things and not tell the girl you're with, which is obvious. That is the case. A lot of you guys are coping hard. And the reality is you want to fuck around and send messages to some chick that's on Instagram and do dumb simpy shit or cheat or do fucking whatever. And you don't want the girl to know. So you're not fighting to have her fucking stuff. That's a reality for a lot of you. Let's be real. And so we can all stop lying to ourselves here, right? If you got nothing to hide and she has nothing to hide, and you're in a relationship, particularly cohabitating, all right, where you're building a life, how, you know what I mean? There's no reason to not share those things. It's a greater inconvenience actually to keep those things a secret, right? And so you should, and if you can't trust the person you're with that information, or if she can't trust you, then you shouldn't be in a sexual commitment. You shouldn't be giving your fidelity to somebody that you can't trust with passwords and a location. If I thought my girl was going to go through my accounts, go through my, my social media and my YouTube and sabotage my business or do something crazy, well, then I shouldn't be in a relationship with her. You know what I mean? That's what I mean. So it's a demonstration of a higher amount of trust when you're able to share these things. It is not a demonstration of a lack of trust. When you can share these things and she can share them with you, she's demonstrating that she trusts you more, not that there's a trust issue. That's the psyops. That's the mind fuck that you've bought into, that somehow sharing certain things means that there's a red flag. We don't trust each other. No, not unless you're doing it out of paranoia and then secretly spying on each other all the time. All right. If that's what you're doing, that's a different problem. But no, sharing these things is because you trust each other to not be crazy and to not be spying on each other and to not be. Do you see what I'm saying? It's actually flipped around, right? And there's the only reason why you wouldn't share these things like location, whatever, is because of a lack of trust between you two. because of somebody wanting to at least open the door to do deceptive behavior. Because we're not talking about an inconvenience on your life. We're talking about a small thing, very easy to do. You go in your phone, my iPhone, go to iPhone and go to find my whatever, and then share my location, and it shares. That's it. It's a button and it's done. You see what I'm saying? So, like, unless she's trying to be deceptive or unless there's a lack of trust in the relationship, those are the only two reasons to not do it. There's tons of other reasons to do it and tons of other benefits. Do you know what I mean? Putting tags on keys and wallets and phones, for example, can track a person, but it also tells you where you left your keys, wallet, or your phone. We've had that before where she or myself couldn't find one of our items and we found it. You see what I'm saying? So I think you need to rethink this, and all you guys need to rethink this. You've been psyoped, in my opinion. If you think that simple gestures like sharing your information, sharing locations with somebody that you're building a life with and committed to, if you think that that is a problem and a lack of trust and something where you're, trying to have too much, the example, what he said, extreme ownership on someone's life, you've been socially conditioned the wrong way, in my opinion. I mean, you don't have to do all those things. Maybe you choose not to, but if you think it's bad to do it, you've been socially conditioned. Because the real question is, why are you not doing it? And I'm not talking about somebody you're just dating. Again, somebody you're in a relationship with. Why are you not doing it? Don't forget to like and subscribe, get in the community, and we'll sort these things out for you.